Welcome back to another video. Today's topic is remind me. Now, going into remind me, it sounds like just a simple phrase, but there's a lot more to it. And wanted to talk a little bit about the art of the embedded command. So I'm not ever sure if you've really heard of that before, but what embedded commands do are they are softening language. So they are good at bypassing the conscious mind and placing ideas directly into the subconscious mind. So if you're not familiar with the conscious and the subconscious mind, the conscious mind essentially makes decisions just in regards to what you are going to do. But the conscious mind is very, I guess, subjective to suggestion. So in other words, the subconscious mind doesn't declare if something's right or wrong, it just does it, right? So consider the subconscious mind like programming and consider the conscious mind like, let's say, the gatekeeper, so to speak, right? So if you know how a gatekeeper works, it kind of just shoos away anything that it decides to reject, and it only allows things that it actually accepts to come in. But the subconscious mind just does whatever it needs to do, right? So the whole idea of a embedded command is it's a form of negotiation that bypasses the conscious mind and goes directly to the subconscious mind. Because if you can put something in the subconscious mind, it literally just executes against it without any questions. So when you look at remind me, think about what that actually does, right? So if you change the word remind to help me, right? So everyone wants to help someone, right? So when you have those embedded commands, it's really a question of what do you actually have to exert to do something to assist someone else. So the remind me one, it actually started rubbing me a little the wrong way at a certain point. So my wife loves to use remind me. She's very good at the power of manifestation. So if you're not familiar with what manifestation is, it's the ability to make things grow. So I kind of joke about it, but it works. It's got this double-edged sword, right? So you can make things grow, which is incredibly powerful, right? But what it means is you can make solutions grow and you can also make problems grow, right? So you just have to be very focused and what's the word? Uh, you have to be very pointed at what direction you're going in, because if you're going in the wrong direction, it can spell ruin. If you're going in the right direction, it's bliss, right? So you have to kind of decide which side do you actually want to be on there. But she has the power to make things grow. So I didn't really understand it before, but remind me is something that actually is very powerful in her allowing to do that, because it allows other people to pour energy into her for the things that she actually may want to do, right? But she also has a very discerning nature about that. So usually, remind me is something that I'm on the receiving end of and my wife is on the giving end of, right? So when you use an embedded command, you're bypassing, let's say, the no's that someone actually give. So I'm usually someone that says yes to my wife most of the time, but my wife is usually someone who says no to me most of the time. So maybe I just don't have that art of bypassing the conscious mind very well. But regardless of that, we're diving down into the remind me and how that's actually used as a embedded command. So my wife uses it as a way to make sure that if there's something on someone else's agenda that she needs to do, that they step up and they keep reminding her of that. All right. So you step up and you essentially keep implanting that thought into her mind so eventually it gets done. So that's her way of just making sure that if something's important enough, let's say to someone else, that they will pester her enough in order to get it done. So wonder why the kids keep coming back and say, "Hey mom, can you do this? Hey mom, can you do that?" Because sometimes the energy you put out is the same energy you actually get back. So that might be something to her for her to look into. But when I look at remind me on my standpoint, it's really a question of importance. That's essentially what I consider, right? So usually I only like saying things once, not repeatedly. And once I say things once, I like to move on. So I want to be someone who's very exact in their language. So remind me is almost like this idea of whatever I said the first time isn't good enough. So you got to keep saying it over and over and over and over again. And that kind of gets to me a little bit because I don't consider that the best use of my time. So looking at remind me, the way that I look at it is if I, let's say, put something out there for something that needs to be done, I would appreciate if it was important enough that someone wouldn't need to say essentially remind me, right? So that's my standpoint on that. So as far as embedded commands, I definitely see the value of it, but I'm almost looking at least at the art of the defensive embedded command, or how do you defend against embedded commands? And with remind me, I just had to approach my wife and essentially say, well, every time that you say remind me, it feels as though something that I've actually asked or requested isn't as important as, let's say, the other things on your list. And so that was my defense. I'm not saying defense against the dark arts or anything, but that's my defense against embedded commands. Sometimes, depending on how embedded commands are used, you need to understand, how do you kind of like do a matrix move and kind of like avoid avoid getting hit by it, right? But I think it's important to understand what an embedded command is, how it can impact you, and how it can persuade you. And if you're not on guard, it can be very easy to sort of just jump into that program. So the way that I look at it is importance. If something is important enough, you will find a way to do it. There will not necessarily need to be a reminder. And going to this whole idea of why would someone use remind me in the first place, it may actually come down to fear in a certain circumstance. So one thing that I can think of is when someone says remind me, they could have a fear of success or a fear of loss. And so let me describe that a little bit. So a fear of success, if someone says remind me, that means if that task doesn't get done, they could use someone as a scapegoat and said, well, you didn't remind me to do that. If you had reminded me, I would have done it. And so that fear of success, you almost preempt it's your fault before anything ever gets done. Because if someone doesn't remind you, then it's like, well, it's not my fault, it's your fault, right? So that's one way to shed the blame. But another way is this kind of fear of loss. So it's not so much completing the task, but it's being reminded that the task actually needs to get done. And there may be a fear of loss of if someone doesn't remind me, I'm afraid that I may forget. And if I forget, I don't want to do that because then I've lost something. Right. So that's something else to consider there. But sometimes it really depends on how someone's actually using an embedded command. But my belief is intent is incredibly important, and understanding what you're doing and why you're doing is equally important to that. So again, I look at embedded commands or something can be very useful in getting things done. And I also look at being able to defend against an embedded command is just being aware of the different language patterns that are actually being used and how they affect people, what you can do to just make sure that your agenda is still being pushed forward. So I hope you appreciated this lesson. Embedded commands, defense against embedded commands, that might be onto something new. I'm gonna have to dig through and see if there's any other pieces that would fit in there. But again, I hope you appreciate this lesson. And if you're still listening, thank you, because it's a little bit long-winded. But again, if you like it, give me some more ideas of some topics that you'd actually like to hear about. So until the next clip, bye.